The graduation address gives us the opportunity to hear from a distinguished member of our alumni community, and we're very fortunate today that the address will be delivered by Mr. Ganesh Kashyap. Mr. Kashyap graduated with a Bachelor of Engineering from Monash University and also holds a Master in Business Administration. He's currently the Chief Executive and General Manager of CopRice, an animal nutrition business which is a leading producer of pet food, equine feeds and dairy stock feed. The company has 270 million in sales and a team of over 300 people across 8 manufacturing sites in Australia and in New Zealand. Over his 25-year career, Ganesh has led large organisations and manufacturing assets across the Asia-Pacific region, including Mondelez International, the multinational food snack company with brands such as Cadbury's, Toblerone and Oreo cookies. I now have very great pleasure in inviting Mr. Ganesh Kashyap to deliver today's graduation address. Thank you so much.
Deputy Chancellor, Mr. John Simpson, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Enterprise and Engagement, Professor Doran Ben-Meyer, Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Professor Yanis Ventikos, members of the faculty, guests, and especially the new graduates. It is an absolute honour to be with you today in what is a major milestone in your life. Graduating with a degree from Monash is not easy. It takes several years of very hard work and dedication. I completed a degree in engineering from this very campus in Clayton, and I remember my graduation day. I remember feeling relieved, to be honest, and excited, but I was also pretty nervous because I wasn't sure that I was clear on what my plan was next. As it turned out, the next 25 years of my career was a roller coaster ride that I couldn't have imagined. There were some incredible highs. There were also several crushing lows and many lessons learned. I must say, I wish that some of the lessons that I did learn along that roller coaster ride, I wish that I was told about them earlier. So today what I want to do was share 3 stories from my career and some of the lessons that I learned, and I hope that they're of use to you as you begin your journey. So my first story is about the importance of humility. When I graduated from Monash, I applied for jobs like everyone else. It was a scary time. I remember the number of companies that I applied to and the pile of rejection letters that I received. So it certainly wasn't easy. But finally I got my big break. I got a graduate engineering role at the Ford Motor Company, who used to have a car assembly plant in Broadmeadows back at that time. I was really excited. I was 22 years old at the time, and it was my first ever job, so I couldn't wait to get started. But when I got there, I have to say I was a little disappointed. Because, you see, I somehow thought, as an engineering graduate, having completed my degree here, I somehow thought I would be doing engineering work. I thought, maybe I might be designing the electricals for the new model Ford, or maybe implementing robotics and other types of automation into the plant. I was really expecting that I would be learning from experienced engineers who would teach me about how the theories that I'd learned in university and how to apply them in the real world. But this wasn't my first job. My first job was to manage a section of the plant with 40 factory workers, mostly women actually, who sewed the seat covers for the Ford Falcon. My job was to make sure that I could help them be successful in their jobs, which meant anything from making sure that the sewing machines had enough thread to solving day-to-day production issues. Then I was 22 years old, and most of these ladies were old enough to be my mum. So I'm not sure how seriously they took me, although they were very kind to me. Very often communication wasn't easy because English was their second language. I felt that I wasn't sure there was that much that I could learn from them. Then there was my boss. He was a gruff 50-something production manager named Alan. Alan hailed from the north of England. I think he was from Liverpool, and he'd never been to university. He'd started his career on the factory floor and worked his way up the ranks to management roles. He certainly wasn't the wise engineering wizard that I had in mind when I left uni and took up my role. So my initial period, my first few weeks at Ford were pretty miserable. But one day, Alan took pity on me, and he pulled me aside for a chat. He said to me, "Ganesh, everybody has something that they can teach you. No matter how different their background is to yours, where they're stationed in life, there are usually a few things that they know more about than you, they are more experienced in or better at than you. Find out what those things are, ask questions, and learn from it." I put that advice to work. So the next 2 years, I put aside my desire to learn about engineering, and instead I put my effort into learning from Alan and from the ladies on the factory floor. I found there was a huge amount that they could teach me about managing and improving production processes, what motivates people, how to negotiate and resolve differences in opinion, how to run better meetings. I even learned the difference between lock-stitch and cross-stitch sewing machines. Everyone has something that they can teach you. But these nuggets of knowledge, I found, are hidden, inside complex human beings who at the surface may seem very different to you. Having the humility to look past these differences and to identify the learning opportunity and ask the questions to unlock the learning, that is the key. That is how you will keep growing. My second story is about perseverance. I've always been the kind of guy that sets goals. My goals usually changed over time. Some were big, some were small, but generally they were goals that I felt were worthwhile pursuing. Shortly after leaving Ford, I joined Deloitte, which was then and is now a global management consulting firm. My goal at that time was to work overseas. You see, growing up in Melbourne in the 80s and 90s, I'd seen very little of the world. And at that time, I had a burning desire to live and work abroad. I was particularly fascinated with the US. It was a country that I'd only ever seen on TV up until that point. I thought working for a global consulting firm, finding an opportunity to work overseas should be easy. But it wasn't. I quickly discovered that in order to work abroad, it really helped if a partner or a senior executive in that firm was willing to sponsor you, right? So that sponsorship was more likely to come if you had specific skills or a relevant track record. At that point, I was still pretty early in my career. I had neither of these, but I was determined to find a way. So I researched every office in the US, and I found who were the partners in the US. I culled the list down to a list of 6 partners whom I thought would be able to help me. So anyway, I wrote to each of them very politely, introducing myself, laying out whatever limited experience I had, and I expressed my desire to work for them on a project. So 4 never wrote back. 2 wrote back politely, but worse to the extent of, "Don't call me, I'll call you." I was pretty disappointed, but I didn't give up. I started regularly emailing the 2 that did write back. I tried to find ways to be helpful to them. For example, I would find articles or trends that might be relevant to them. I'd write about project briefs that the firm in Australia was working on that I thought they would find interesting. One of the 2, a lady by the name of Robin, she invited me to give her a call. Now, the thing is that Robin was based in Chicago. So the only time that was right for me to call her was 1 o'clock in the morning for me. But I made it a point to stay up till 1 a.m. I'd call her, put in a call once a fortnight. I didn't always get through to speak to her, but when I did, they were pretty good conversations. Finally, I got the break I needed. Robin offered me a project in Toronto, Canada. Not quite the US, but close enough at that point for me. 6 months of effort, 6 months after setting the goal for myself to work overseas, 6 months of effort in forgetting about what was important to me, what were my drivers, and focusing my energies on her drivers. 6 months of staying up late, putting in one more phone call, writing one more article, I finally had gotten my big break. And it was worth it. That time in Canada was an amazing professional and personal experience. But you know, what's interesting about that is at that time, I was the envy of my cohort in the Melbourne office. How had I managed to get selected for an overseas assignment, everyone thought? What a stroke of luck. Well, let me tell you, luck had nothing to do with it. It was the result of setting a goal and systematically working towards it. It was perseverance that had got me the result. I still really believe you make your own luck. My third story is about empathy. So by the time I turned 30, life was going pretty well. I was established in my career, and Rebecca and I had just gotten married. We had recently bought a house and were making plans to start a family. My goal at that time was to start my own business. And I got the chance to do that when two colleagues from Deloitte invited me to build a startup consulting firm with them. We'd gotten together, we'd developed great business plans, and we even had an anchor client, who was going to support us. It was really exciting, but it was also really scary because it required me to leave a well-paid job and invest a large amount of money into a startup. So as usual, my wife Rebecca was the voice of quiet confidence. "What have we got to lose?" she said. "I'm working, and if things don't work out, you'll find another job. So go for it, or you're going to die wondering." So I went for it. The first 6 months were challenging, but it was very energetic. My business partners and I had to work hard, but we were seeing some success with that first client that we had. But life has a way of, punching you in the gut when you least expect it. My beautiful wife was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, a form of cancer with a mixed prognosis. The next few months were one of the darkest periods of my life. Rebecca went through rounds of chemotherapy at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute. I really didn't know what to do. Tears were never far away, and I'd never been more scared in my life. The lovely team at the Peter Mac were so supportive of us. They used to let me spend days on end in an armchair next to Rebecca's bed. Sometimes I stayed the night on that armchair. I was doing my best to hold it together and keep a brave face, but it was an emotionally demanding period when I had very little ability to focus on my business. But focus I had to, because it was my business, it wasn't a job. There was no one I could go to for sick leave or compassionate leave. We were running a big project for a client who was a mining company. There were deadlines, client meetings, all of which had to go on. And besides, my business partners were counting on me. So I remember staying on that armchair one night, then showering and changing into my business suit in the visitor's bathroom at the Peter Mac, then making the short walk from the hospital to the boardroom of my client in Collins Street in the Melbourne CBD. It was spring, the sun was shining. Melbourne's cafes were buzzing. It was surreal. I felt like I was walking in a bubble. While life was continuing as normal for others in the city, my own life was far from normal. I'd just spent the night in an armchair at the Peter Mac and maybe had 2 hours sleep. I walked into the meeting room with my client, Ian, and today I cannot even remember what we talked about, but I can exactly remember how I felt. Do they not see me? Can they not recognize from my bad shave and my crumpled suit what I was going through? I think Ian could see it. Even though we never spoke about it, something in Ian's eyes and his manner towards me showed me that he knew I was going through a tough time. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't kindness. It was empathy. Thankfully, my wife's condition responded to treatment. We were incredibly lucky. Over the years that followed, we rebuilt our lives and we were blessed with 2 wonderful kids. My business also survived, and in fact, it flourished. Exactly 8 years after that time, my partners and I successfully sold that business to a large ASX-listed company. But the lessons I learned on empathy stayed with me. As you go through your career, you will come across various situations with colleagues, customers, suppliers, team members, maybe even bosses, who are carrying problems that you have no idea about. Your ability to empathize will make you a better colleague, a better leader, and ultimately more successful in your endeavors. You're at an exciting point in your life. You've just finished your university degree, and a world of continued learning, opportunity, and growth awaits you. Each of you have different goals, that much I'm sure of, and your journey will be your own. But as you move forward, I hope that today my stories on humility, perseverance, and empathy give you some food for thought. Congratulations on your graduation. I wish you the very best. Thank you.
Ganesh, I'd like to, in thanking you, acknowledge your wife who's here and your parents who I believe are here in the audience. And so again, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to thank Ganesh very much for his remarks.